Good evening. Good evening, ma.
Good evening.
It is a great honor to be here this evening to just interact with people such as yourself, our very own chaplain, and his beautiful wife, Professor and Dr. Mrs. Mokuolu. It has been 30 years of marital bliss, so we've just been discussing and interacting. Right. I'm sure that you have answered this question a lot of times, and then I'm sure that Daddy has always gone first. So this evening, I'll start with Mommy. How did you meet?
Well, that's a good question. First sight of him was in sometimes 1985. I went to visit one of my cousins in UCH Ibadan, and I hadn't been there before, so at a market in Ibadan, I wanted to take a bus to UCH by the direction of people that were helping me to. So I just noticed that when I got there at UCH from that bus, two people got down also, and they looked like my age. They looked like students as well in that school. I just said, let me ask. I know it's a particular hostel. These people too may know, maybe to guide me to where I was going that day. So I asked the two of them. They were also coming. They were coming from that market, and I said I was looking for so hostel. They said that's where they are going. I said, okay, thank God. Thank God, at least I know people who will lead me there to where my cousin lives. So that time I must say here that there was nothing like these mobile phones and nothing like that. And here is this man. After knowing that we are going to the same place, he just collected my bag. He said, don't worry, I will help you. Because I was coming, my intention was to stay overnight with my cousin before going back to Lagos. So he said, let me help you. So I was left alone just with my purse. He carried the other bag. And that was when I noticed, you really saw his hair and nothing. So when we got to the hostel, unfortunately my cousin wasn't there. He wasn't around. There was nothing like mobile phone to have called her ahead, I didn't tell her I was coming. I just wanted the surprise visit. So I was left in a sister's house. They all belonged to the same fellowship. And he also was there. We were just talking. And further, what also went into my head concerning him that day was anytime I wanted to quote scripture, because I just quickly got to know that these people are also Christians like me, and it's as if we became like family almost immediately. And there in that sister's room, I just sat there. They entertained me and welcomed me, and we started talking about life generally. And anytime I wanted to apply the scripture, he would just finish it for me. So with that thing also went into my head, and that ended there. So the next time I was to meet him was at the NYC camp. He was there earlier in Benue State. That was 1988 in Benue State. And after the fellowship, because I came in late in the night, the fellowship was on already. When I got there immediately, I asked, is there a fellowship? They said yes. In fact, they said they were meeting. So I said, let me join them. What am I here for? So I joined the fellowship that night with my bags. Again, I was coming from NYC. I had bags, big bags. So after the fellowship, this man walked up to me. I looked at his face. I remember UCH. I remembered him. Because, all those junctions of help that he has offered made him to stick in my head. So I said, in fact, what came to my mind was these love people. They love so much that first time seeing me, they care for me that much. I said, this love brethren. I said, good to see you. And again, he carried my bag. So he carried my bag that night again. And we started meeting almost every night during fellowship, because the same fellowship. That was a Benue State Christian Corpus, BNCCF, Benue State Christian Corpus Fellowship. And then, well, we started seeing each other every evening, because the fellowship was holding every evening. There was no break. Every evening we met, and then we were seeing each other.
All right.
Well, the rest is history.
Daddy, what would you say was your first impression when you saw Mommy? Like, first impression?
I wouldn't say I had a first impression. I must be honest about that. Because the truth of the matter is that the person in whose company she saw me the first time, there was a contemplation that we could go into a relationship. So, strictly speaking, I was okay. Put it that way. So the thing that she was describing, honestly, were second nature to us. I later on realized that what we took for granted as a campus in UCH Christian Fellowship was probably not a very common experience across campuses. We actually relate very well among brethren, and if you see us today, it still persists. So I didn't have that initial first impression in terms of going forward with a relationship. Okay, even when we met again in camp, what she didn't tell you was that she came in while they were saying the closing prayer, and her shoes made a lot of noise. And out of curiosity, I opened my eyes to just wonder who was this person coming in. And then it struck me that I thought I had seen this face before. And if you recognize how you feel during NYSC, I can testify to that. Because you are all strangers, any string of recognition tends to bring you together in the midst of, so you are looking at all faces trying to see who you know. So immediately I saw that face, I thought I had seen the face before. I honestly did not immediately remember where and when, okay, but went to her after fellowship and I said, I thought we've met before. So just when I was saying that, she also had a recollection and she shouted, "Oh, she said those love brethren." Then we did. So maybe my real first seeing, I hope nobody from Medical and Dental Council is listening. So probably my real first seeing was one of the days we went out for our activity during NYSC. And then I had the responsibility of leading a battalion, a batch of the corpers for an assignment in the local government headquarters to lead a parade. On my way back from that assignment, she was then trying to go out, and it's like I had spent a whole day on that assignment, walking back to our camp, and right at the gate of camp, I then saw her now fresh, trying to go out, and I decided to turn around at that point and accompany her out. So I think maybe from there, I then realized that, okay, she was a bit in my consciousness, and when we were to go for this thing called endurance trek, all the preparation that I was making for myself, I found myself making those preparations in double, okay, and getting her materials also to help during the endurance trek. And finally, there was something that brought her to clinic when I was attending. That's why I said I hope the MDC is not listening. And after attending to all those ones, we kept having a conversation. She did try for a very long time to teach me one song, very basic song which I could not comprehend, and I'm sure she must have wondered whether indeed I have MBBS. But because my mind was at that time a bit distracted, yeah, so it's built up. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. All right. From the point of courtship now to getting married, you have told us a lot of times that you were not the richest person at the point of getting married. Now, for mommy, it is common knowledge. A lot of people say, "Oh, financial security is very important." How did that play out at the early phase of your marriage? Saying that there was not so much at the beginning of marriage.
Yes, you are right. At the beginning, we had practically nothing. But again, somehow God has given me a gift of saying things beyond maybe what people see, what people know. I just know that tomorrow was going to be good. That we may not have now. I just have that peace that it's just a matter of time. So having nothing, it wasn't, apart from the job, we didn't have time NYC. I was also able to get a job a good time. We didn't litter the street for too long before we got something doing. But apart from the job, we didn't have any car, nothing much. Apart from his bags of clothes and just his certificates, his MBBS and NYC discharge certificates. Ditto myself. But again, there was something in me that was telling me that tomorrow was going to be good. With God on our side, I knew it was going to be good.
Daddy, how did that affect you at the beginning of marriage, since that there was not so much?
The problem in my own case was that I didn't realize I did not have. That's my own problem. It's so, and I really mean it. You see, sometimes when I hear people cry about certain things, I'm wondering, is it that we escaped those lessons or what happened? But I was so insulated somehow. So I wouldn't say that I had faith that tomorrow would be better. I was okay that time. I was okay. I was just living life, understanding that I'm in God's hand. So that is one of the reasons maybe you won't hear me share a testimony of suffering. Okay. But when I really and come to think about it, we went through almost the same things that people went through. Okay, how will I say it? In the early stages, as I told some of you, we moved into the house of a friend. Now, we didn't know how far his gas cooker was, the gas remaining in his kitchen was, until the day he traveled, and it happened that day, the gas finished. There was no electricity. We didn't know what to do in somebody else's house. We just know that we'll go to the kitchen, we cook. Okay? Now there was no electricity. There was no money. Why did I say there was no electricity? I was ready to use the reverse surface of an iron to boil rice. Yeah, we did it in secondary school. You put it in between the bed and it will become a hot plate. You will cook your rice. So I just needed to fall back on some of those culinary skills. Either that or you use a boiling ring and then you pour geisha. You are going to eat, you will be fine. Nothing will happen to you. But there was no electricity. So that day I entered into my room to pray and say, God, I have a wife. I have this, I have that. Absolutely no food. So what do we do? After prayer, I dressed up. And I had no money. Real no money. I dressed up and went to the road, stopped a taxi to take me to the teaching hospital from Sawmill. And when the taxi stopped, I said, "Can he carry me for free? I don't have money." So the man looked at me. I guess he was probably dumbfounded that he couldn't reconcile me with where I was and what I was saying. So he looked at me and he offered to carry me, and he carried me. He dropped me in front of the hospital. As soon as I got in front of the hospital, I saw somebody else. We normally just call him Mokuolu, and at the gate of the hospital, and he saw me. He said, greeted each other. "Where am I going?" I said, "I'm going to the market to buy a stove." Okay. He said, "Let me go and drop you there." I said, "That's not my problem. I don't have money for the stove." And then he said, "Yeah, I'll take you there." So he took me to market, bought the stove on my behalf, and then I came back with that. That was what we used to boil rice that day, and we had something to eat. Now, think about it. I must have had 1,000 stories of such an occasion, maybe with people crying. I rather just saw it as an opportunity to prove that God can provide. I didn't understand it that I was suffering in any way. I saw it more like a life testimony of what God could do. Another instance, very early that period, we had our sister-in-law staying with us. It was her birthday. And I said to her, "Look, we don't have what it takes. Would have loved to do your birthday for you. But look into the house, whatever you can find, use it." Absolutely nothing. We could not drop a penny for that day. And not because we were careless, but you see, my salary in those days was 377 naira. And I had dependents. From the day we moved in with our relatives. Okay, so it's not because we were careless. At home, we barely eat anything luxurious. It was always biscuit bowl that we were buying in the hospital, in the market, and the cow skin. That was what was always in our meal. And yet I was a junior doctor, but that's the situation we found ourselves. Okay, so that my sister-in-law that day, as God will have it, somebody came all the way from Ondo State looking for a doctor because the child had a problem. Eventually got referred to me. I attended to them, and this person at departure gave 220 naira notes that time. Okay, 220 naira notes. So when we saw that, there was somebody who came to our house looking for someone to buy chicken who had broken leg. So we bought the chicken for 20 naira. Okay, actually the person sold for 10 naira. But we said if the person could sell for 10 naira, she must be in a desperate situation. So we added 10 naira and bought it 20 naira. And then took the remaining 20 naira to the nearby market to buy some fish and things like that. Then somebody else brought yam that day. So that was how that day ended, with us eating pounded yam, good vegetable soup, and all of that. And chicken, for that matter. So what am I getting at? In all this, we actually rejoiced that God provided. I didn't understand suffering. I don't know if I'm communicating. I never felt deprived. I felt privileged to be able to taste God. Yeah, so actually because of that, I used to have this nickname then that I was being called NFA, no future ambition.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So you've told us once that there was a waiting period of about 2 to 3 years before you had your first child. Was that a conscious effort, given the cultural mindset at that time?
No. It was a delay.
Okay. So how can you say that it affected the dynamics of the home at that time, like marriage and all of that?
Well, maybe my wife may speak for herself, but the first thing I quickly had to address was that what is our conceptual definition of family? And we settled for the definition that family is husband, wife, plus or minus the gift of children. That husband and wife completes the family. The children are a blessed addition, then they also make up the family. If you don't have, you are not less a family. If you have, that's part of the nuclear family. So we settled for that definition very quickly on my own part. And then I knew that I also needed to give assurance that I wasn't overtly troubled by that. We desired it, I won't say we did not, but we had to also quickly position that. I had to project that supposing I will never have, what will happen to the marriage? And somehow within me, I had reached a point of saying, even if we do not have, this marriage will go all the way by the grace of God. Okay? But then, for a lady, whether we like it or not, the arrival of a monthly period is always a reminder that something is missing. Meanwhile, part of the troubles that a lady will have is that this is an obligation to fulfill. And again, in our own cultural setting, it will appear as if you are not yet well seated in that house. If that does not happen. But I had made up my mind, really, that I had married. And honestly, when we signed for better, for worse, I thought I understood what the implication of that meant. Okay? But then we also dug deeply into the scriptures to begin to now look for answers, and we also subjected ourselves to relevant medical tests. And the interesting thing was that when medical test was almost going to begin to show some little challenges here and there, that was when the power of God took over and we had answers to our prayer.
Then I want to pick something from there. The steps of the righteous are ordered by the Lord. How can a man except God? So in all things, we should just continue to submit ourselves in spite of any challenge that comes our way. We should submit ourselves continually to God, because God, who knows the beginning, the end from the beginning, is at work. Sometimes when I look back at the time, it was 3 years after I married that Toluwade came, and I just look at it and say, assuming that immediately we moved into this brother's house, because we started with in a friend's house. We didn't have a house of our own. How would it have been, carrying pregnancy, under those circumstances? The initial years were not too easy because we didn't have a house. We had to wait some months before the university teaching hospital gave us our 3-bedroom flat then, and we started keeping it gradually. And I could look back and say, God, thank you, because our baby came at the right time. It may look as if with the waiting period, I used to cry then, but again, I said, God, I thank you. It was the correct time. God's time.
Now you have 3 beautiful ladies, Toluwani, Ayo, and okay, we have a picture, and then we have a picture.
Okay.
All right. So.
Wow.
How would you say parenting 3 ladies? What is your take on that? Because you are really gone with parenting ladies and 3 beautiful ladies.
Well, I can say that they are not all the same. Toluwani is different from Ayomiku, and is different from Manu. They are individuals that you just have to learn to understand individuality in them and treat them accordingly. You can't say, hey, can't you be like your senior sister? Like, no, she's peculiar, specially made. She's, God has designed her in her own way, and she has her own profile and line in life, purpose. So one have to acknowledge that. And I give thanks to God that they have not robbed the preaching of the gospel from our heart, from our mouth. They are giving us the chance to continue to preach the gospel because they have not gone the other way. And we give thanks to God today. We don't have any regrets over them. And I believe that the Lord who is at work with them will continue to be, and the glory of the Lord will be made manifest in their individual lives.
Yes.
Well, we bless God. My wife has said it. Yeah, we recognize that they are going to be different. And I also need to point out that the name of the second is Ayomeko. Okay. By implication, we had accepted, for us who waited on the Lord, when we had the first, we were glad. Remember that there was a mindset that maybe we would not have. Okay. Now we then had one, so we said to Lord, it should belong to God. Okay, consistent with biblical principles. And then secondly, we then said, Ayomeko. We were grateful. We felt that was the icing of the cake. Our joy was full. We were not gender oriented. Whatever God gave to us, we had said to ourselves, that's what God has decided that we should look after on His behalf. He is the owner of genealogy. Me, I serve God in my generation and I go. Okay. So, all that. So when Anu came, Anu was 7 years later. And in all of this spacing, it wasn't because of contraception. So I used to say that we went through infertility 3 times. Okay? Before everyone, there was a delay actually. Not because of contraception, but usually you won't talk about the subsequent ones because once you have had one, so much. We had delay in all the 3 actually. And that was why when Anoluwapo came, we also named her Anoluwapo. It was just God's mercy. It was a 7-year interval in our case before she came. We had resigned ourselves. We were not even thinking of children anymore. So I just needed us to understand that we accepted what God gave us and we respected their individuality. And parenting them, the task has been to watch them, preserve their individuality, culture them according to how we are perceiving God to have invested in their lives and developing them along those lines. Yeah.
It is common knowledge that once there is a family and all attention moves to the children, so the relationship between the man and his wife is all about the children. How have you kept your marriage fresh between you and your wife?
Children are children. Me and my wife are me and my wife. They know that. You see, the first thing was that we had to be sure that they don't play us against each other. And I think they understood that from early stages of their life. If you call my wife and you say something and she gives you an answer, the likelihood is high, 99%, that when you call me, you will probably get the same answer. Okay. After the call, the two of us may discuss and change our opinion. Okay, but it's unlikely you will hear one person being permissive, the other being this. No. So we try to maintain that. We also understood pretty early that we must not put our affection on the children at the expense of ourselves. Okay, so we kept up with our relationship and made sure that we're not relating in a triangular way. Because we know that they will go. So if we don't know how to talk to each other, how do we learn that, let's say 30 years down the line, now they have all gone? So what do you then begin to do? Okay, so we've been conscious of that for a very long time. So we love our children, they are close to us. We banter a lot, but then we are married. So even they themselves, they know when they are used to one of our common phrases, go and marry.
Well, how do you say you've been able to keep your marriage fresh?
Well, marriage is between a man and his wife, so we must get to understand that from the onset, that it is the two of you that started this journey, and at the end of this of it all, is going to two of you are also going to be left with one another. So having that in your head, when you are raising your children, it's always good to remember that one day these children also will grow, they will marry, and they will leave the home. So you are going to be left with your spouse. So at that point, do you want to be a stranger to one another? So that is the question that comes to mind when you are raising children. You should put that also, learn that also at that early stage, knowing that there has to be a balance in somewhere. You will love your child, care for your child, but again, don't neglect your spouse at the expense of that child, because that child, by the grace of God, will be married one day and leave the home. At that point, you should not be strangers to yourselves. So there is a balance. You should learn that balancing as early as possible.
So we dug deep again and we have pictures. All right. So can you tell us what was
that was our engagement night. What you call the engagement before the wedding.
That was exactly 30 years today. 2 days before.
2 days before the wedding.
Yeah, 30 years exactly.
That picture is 30 years.
I remember who was talking because you looked so excited in the picture.
And I was giving certificate. Daddy was helping me to give certificate to somebody.
So that was the very first house that we had.
Okay.
Yeah. So along the line, we had to start 1 or 2 businesses to augment our income, as I told you about our starting point. And my wife went on to learn sewing and fashion designing, and that really became a big part of our story. So in addition to the fact that it brought us added income, we also saw it as a platform for helping people who are less privileged. And for our own house help who was with us then, we tried to send her to school, but she wasn't looking so compatible anymore. So we saw that as an opportunity to train her and equip her with a skill. But not only her, many other people we trained that way. And we had to show the Christian difference in what we were doing. For instance, in some of those fashion designing things, when it's about time for them to graduate, if you see the list of what they have to present to their trainers, it's always a huge list, like an engagement list. Okay. But we had to do that in a different way. For all the people who graduated from what we call our own sewing institute, it cost them 1,000 naira, which they pay for their certificate, and we produce certificate for them. And we don't make any other formal request for ourselves from them. We give them a piece of clothing as a gift from a piece of material as material from us as a family, and then we request of them that their parents or sponsors should buy them a sewing machine so that we know they have something to use when they finish. And it is compulsory that the cloth they are going to wear that day, they must be the person who sewed it, as evidence that they have learned and mastered the skill. We thank God for that era. I can't count how many people we trained and who have gone on to really do well for themselves. And some have even ultimately traveled out, and a few are doing well. At least it gives several people a takeoff point in their own life.
That's so beautiful. Mommy, a large portion of your tertiary institution was done as a married woman. What was the influence of that on the home and your role as a mother?
Well, thank God for my husband. We actually got those degrees together because, number one, without his support, there is no way I could have been able to achieve those miles, cover those miles and all those successes. You need the support of your spouse in order to really be successful in whatever you lay your hand upon. And I have learned one thing, that whatever I want to do, if my husband is not supporting me, I will not go on. I will not do it, because definitely that thing will not succeed. It will not. You need to agree in order for you to have success in whatever you want to do. I have known that. So whatever I bring to the table, if he's not supporting it, forget it. I know that we must agree. I can convince him to agree. Once he's agreed, then I'll go on. But if he doesn't, I won't. So I thank God for him. If possible, those certificates should actually be his. It has been the support all the way, even till now.
So 8 years ago, so you became our chaplain. So you moved from a member family to be the chaplain of Chapel of Christ the Healer, University of Ilorin Teaching Hospital. How can you say that the transition from being a member of the church to being the chaplain affected the family and its influence on how people around saw the family?
Maybe we should correct that. Right from the onset, he was acting chaplain. So the ministry, the church, the chapel will be 10 years in the next few months. So actually, he had started with acting chaplain for about 2 years before, I think it was 2 years, before being full chaplain. I remember when the church was to start, the Christian community in UITH called for a meeting, which I too was part of. I was part of that meeting. Unfortunately, my husband wasn't even around, wasn't in Ilorin to attend that meeting, so I was the one there. He traveled. So, right there in the meeting, the elders suggested Dr. Mokuolu then. Oh, was he a professor? You're already a professor that time. Okay, he was still a doctor. They suggested him. And I know that my husband was very busy, so I said in my heart that how will he cope being a chaplain of a whole university teaching hospital chapel? So I was going to say no, but again, I couldn't say it because everybody just said yes. Even if I had said no, they would have buried my no. So that was how in absentia he became the acting chaplain. So I had to report to him, you are now our chaplain. To say, gbawole dinye, gbawole sonye, gbogbo èèyàn ló sọ. I was there, I was a witness. And that was how we started the work.
Thank you, sir.
What more do I say? that has been it. So I just want to thank God for the grace. It didn't look possible. In fact, the word acting was a tactical move in trying to suspend the acceptance. To say, okay, let's make it acting. Hoping that in another year or two, somebody else will emerge and the chapel will be happy. I mean, the Christian community will be happy at making that person the chaplain. But here we are, we're almost 10 years. Thank God.
All right, so we are celebrating 30 years of something freedom. Nah, we tell God. So what do we say at fundamental principles for marriage that stands sure? Fundamental principles.
All right. Well, the most fundamental principle is that Christ should be your foundation. Okay. There is no other foundation that can be laid other than that which is laid in Christ Jesus. But having come into it, a few things are important. The Bible says, for this reason, a man will leave his father and his mother and cleave unto his wife. Now, when we began to study that word cleave, we were guided in understanding to look at the Yoruba meaning of it. And the Yoruba meaning of that word cleave is called faramo. You see, to faramo is like an unconditional acceptance. Okay. Total acceptance of one another. And the reason why that is essential is that we must understand that in the design of marriage, it does appear as if we were originally one stock. That for one reason or the other, God divided that stock into two to make one partner come out from this family and another partner come out from the other family. Then he brings it together. But because we were originally one stock, when that division is done as a divine miracle, okay, some qualities will be resident in this half, some other qualities will be resident in this other half. So today, for instance, let's say I'm more proficient on ICT. For as long as my wife comes and needs assistance on ICT, I cannot push her away. Why? I took away that gift. Do you understand? So, and God did not need to duplicate and create two ICT experts inside the house. All right. So, I am the complement. Of course, we are building up that dimension that the frequency of call is reducing. Okay. But I understand within me that, you see, you took away most of the genes that have to do with that. That type of accept. Now, I can find another lady outside who is very proficient on ICT, but that's not my wife. That's not my wife. That lady who is proficient on ICT is deficient in something else, for which my wife is a better person. So that unconditional acceptance is very foundational. And what the scripture has told us as men, look at all the instructions. Actually, all the instructions were to men, but because we preach, we tend not to talk about it. We're the ones who is to love, even up to the point of laying down our lives. So you love unconditionally. This is very important. When you send those signals properly, you also help your partner to submit and come along. Of course, there are other things: faithfulness to one another, openness to one another, communication, all those other things. We can continue to highlight them, but Christ being our foundation, unconditional acceptance in the relationship, and building up one another. It was very clear to me. Here am I. We were married. By that time, I was a doctor. Even if I didn't make another progress, that was already some kind of title within society. But because it was a bit customary that I was already entering into residency, it was a matter of time. I'll become a consultant again. In all of this, where will my wife be? So, those supports for our own additional degree were mandatory. Otherwise, when I'm talking about publishing a paper, my wife may be talking about cooking soup and we'll be quarreling. But if my laptop is spoiled now, I don't need to preach it. Even my wife will have called the vendor on my behalf and say, where are you? Your friend's laptop is spoiled, so you better be getting ready. I know he will need one. Because we have come to that common understanding of what this does in both of our lives. So it's good to build up one another so that we don't retain disparities. Okay? It might take different pathways of building up. Even if you were both in the full-time ministry, the pastor cannot just continue to develop spiritually and you're not waiting on your partner to equally develop along with you. At some point, those disparities will tear down what one is trying to do. Okay, so I would say that let Christ be your foundation. When you have married on that basis, accept each other unconditionally. Don't allow something else in between, and back up each other in the area of each person's weaknesses, because actually you are the one who took away that person's strength in that regard.
I want to repeat that word, accepting one another unconditionally. Come what may. Come what may. When I married my husband, he wasn't this big. You can check the pictures. But the other time, the neck was so obvious that time. The neck was. Where is the neck now?
It has disappeared.
But he's still mine. I still love him the way he is. I still love him for what he stands for. Come what may. So I'm determined. It is this man. So once you are being pronounced husband and wife, know that it is a journey that has just started. That you, as long as Jesus comes, come what may, he's mine. So that determination, whatever may come, even when outsiders, when friends wants to come and separate, you won't allow it, because you are determined, come what may, it is the two of us. By the grace of God. Amen. And God has been helping us.
Thank you very much for being examples to everyone around you that Christian marriage is possible. This has truly been an honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.